Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, Monroe County Community Schools is asking for a referendum on the ballot this fall, 1 year after the county passed the last school referendum.
I would hope that we could put it off for a year, give the taxpayers a chance to catch their breath.
MCCSC cites a new law capping referendum income as the reason for the request. To help with the cost of higher education, Ivy Tech is giving high schoolers a chance to earn early college credit.
Being able to provide our students a jump start and a free jump start on their college education is just huge for our families.
The program can shave as much as a year off a student's college requirements. And we talk with an expert about what a possible default on the U.S. debt could mean for everyday Hoosiers. We'll have all these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Perry Metz, filling in for Joe Wren. The Monroe County Community School Corporation Board plans to pursue another school tax on this fall's ballot, but it comes just 1 year after voters approved the last referendum. Lucas Gonzalez has this story.
The school board voted Tuesday to notify the county auditor of the proposed referendum it wants to have included on the ballot this fall. The requested rate would not exceed 8.5 cents per $100 of assessed property value. That translates to a roughly $50 annual increase for a homeowner with a property valued at $2,500,000. MCCSC Superintendent Jeff Oswald says the board wasn't expecting to propose another school tax so soon, but the Indiana legislature capped the rate of school tax growth. That could reduce the tax rate of the 2022 referendum by up to 3%.
That means our rate for 2022 is anticipated to drop between 1.5 and 2 cents, which means that we will have less additional revenue in 2024 to do the things that we wanted to do.
Oswald says MCCSC will be able to fund teacher and staff pay increases still with funds from the 2022 referendum, which raised taxes by 18.5 cents per $100 of assessed property value. Members of the public spoke out at an MCCSC community forum Wednesday night, and some questioned the need for another referendum so quickly. The county has previously passed school referendums in 2010 and 2016, as well as last year.
Unfortunately, we have this thing called city government that also taxes us. And my property tax went way up this year because of reassessment. I would hope that we could put it off for a year, give the taxpayers a chance to catch their breath.
Oswald says this referendum will go to expanding early childhood education and eliminating costs to families.
And we also know that our families face many financial barriers to K-12 education as well. That includes Career Center education fees, certification course costs. For example, a CNA course, if you take the class to become a CNA, you want to take the test, those tests are almost $500.
Oswald says the tax rate for MCCSC households is lower than the state average of comparably sized school districts and falls in the bottom 10% of all districts across Indiana. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lucas Gonzalez.
Oswald expects the referendum will ultimately pass if it appears on the November 7th ballot. High cost is making higher education prohibitive for some, but a program through Ivy Tech can help high school students earn college credit for free or at reduced costs before they ever set foot on a campus. Liz DeSantis has this report.
High school students at Academy of Science and Entrepreneurship in Bloomington can now get a head start on college through a new partnership with Ivy Tech. The College Core program allows high schoolers to earn 30 college credits, the equivalent of a freshman year of coursework. Indiana University freshman Emily Silvis earned almost 75 credits with her school's College Core partnership with Ivy Tech in Michigan City, making her a college junior on her very first day of school. She says that earning the College Core in high school made a college degree feel possible.
It took this huge idea of college that is very intimidating and made it feel more achievable, especially with a college program. You don't have to be Einstein to do it. I'm not the best student. I'm not very good at math. I hate really long essays, but it was a totally achievable goal for me.
The earned credit has given her the freedom to explore other subject areas instead of working only on the requirements.
Now I'm easing out my semesters. I'm taking classes that I'm simply interested in, which is really a privilege to be able to nurture my interests rather than just go straight for everything that's in my degree map. Like, I might do scuba diving next semester, who knows?
Because of the credit that she earned in high school, Silvis is eligible to graduate in just half of the normal time, saving her family a lot of money. Academy principal Angie Evans says that she hopes offering the College Core through her school can help other students like Silvis save money.
With the student loan debt crisis that's been in the media recently, we all know how expensive college can be and how detrimental those loans can be to people. And so us being able to provide our students a jump start and a free jump start on their college education is just huge for our families.
Michelle Ashcraft is the Indiana Commission for Higher Education Associate Commissioner for K-12 Strategy. She says the free programs can relieve a lot of the burden of paying for college.
The average kind of full sticker price of going to a year at a public institution is about $22,000. And in many cases, the courses that are being offered for the Indiana College Core are either being offered for free or for very low cost.
Indiana College Readiness Report estimates that the low-cost course options for students have saved more than 10,000 college-going seniors more than $225 million. In the last year, school participation in the College Core has increased by 67%. But the Indiana Commission for Higher Education wants to reach the rest of Indiana high schools in the next 3 years.
We had a lot of schools that were really close to offering that 30 credit block, and that's primarily those who came on here in this last year. And now we're eyeing how can we expand it to all of those other high schools as well.
Teachers must meet accreditation standards to be able to teach dual enrollment courses. Ashcraft says those requirements are one of the biggest barriers to expanding statewide to the rest of the 541 schools.
One of the things that we need to address is beyond just offering that credentialing for free is how might we be able to further incentivize the credentialing of teachers. They're giving up their time to be able to do that.
One of the strategies that schools are using is teacher sharing.
So if 2 or 3 schools are close enough together, especially if we think about online access to courses, are there ways that a couple or a small subset of schools might be able to work together to help share educators and share classes to be able to get students access to that credit?
Ivy Tech Director of K-12 Initiatives Joe Hubanks says he has already seen a few schools band together to share an accredited teacher among a couple neighboring schools.
We're going to see an explosion of teacher sharing to some extent. There's already this kind of thing going on in 2 or 3 schools in my service area.
The Academy is the 9th school in Ivy Tech Bloomington service area to join early college. Eubanks says that several other schools in the area may roll out the program for their students too.
There are several schools, I would say about 3 at this point, that are either have just signed or are about to sign within the coming year. And so that would push us up closer to about 12.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Liz DeSantis.
Other early college high schools in the area that already offer the College Core through Ivy Tech include Bloomfield, Bloomington North, Eastern Green, Lagodi, Martinsville, Mitchell, and Paoli. We're joined now by Clayton Baumgart for headlines from around the state. Welcome, Clayton.
Thanks, Perry. Indianapolis Dr. Caitlin Bernard was fined $3,000 and reprimanded for charges related to abortion care she provided last year to a minor. Prior to seeing the patient, Bernard told an Indianapolis Star reporter that she was providing an abortion to a 10-year-old from Ohio. In a 4-to-1 vote, the state's medical licensing board decided that violating state and federal privacy laws. Bernard was cleared of charges when she failed to report child abuse and is unfit to practice. Two 18-year-olds are in police custody in connection with a shooting Tuesday night at a Columbus park that left 4 people injured. Columbus police responded to a report of shots at the Lincoln Park basketball court near Hamilton Center on the city's north side. There, they found 2 adults and 2 juveniles with gunshot wounds. Following an initial investigation, Alexander Parker was taken into custody following a traffic stop, and Edmarius Oates was later apprehended at his residence. Both Columbus men were charged with aggravated battery and criminal recklessness with a deadly weapon. Broadband connection is still top of mind at the Center for Rural Engagement, despite communities pouring millions into infrastructure. Presenters at a conference in French Lick last week showed many counties remain under and unserved by internet service providers.
Everybody's really talking about broadband, either because they've experienced issues with their service or they've heard about these federal funds that are coming down the pike.
The Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program, or BEAD, and the Digital Equity Program are the 2 main federal programs being implemented in Indiana. Advocates continue to push for greater equity in state plans to build electric vehicle infrastructure. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Comber-Weiland reports leaders in the EV industry discussed the future of clean energy and transportation at a conference this week.
Environmental justice advocates and leaders discussed how equitable access is being addressed with charging stations and EV infrastructure in the state.
We've looked at proximity of the charging stations themselves to disadvantaged communities, and being able to specifically bring that infrastructure to communities that have been historically overburdened or historically have seen underinvestment.
Julie Kempf of the Indiana Office of Energy Development says several sources of state and federal funding, including the bipartisan infrastructure law, have allowed for the expansion of EV infrastructure. She says private and state investment as well as grants provide financial resources to help boost Indiana's future with electric vehicles.
So Indiana doesn't want to just observe the transition, and as the most manufacturing intensive state per capita in the country, we also want to help build that automotive future.
Still, some expressed concerns about equitable access to EVs.
Charging locations should be placed, developed, designed as a transportation network, not throw them all where all the EV owners are.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Comber-Weiland.
Other concerns addressed at the forum included a lack of clear accountability standards for federal governments to ensure states are equitably distributing charging stations and other resources. The State Court of Appeals last week unanimously denied an appeal from Monroe County residents against a trial court's ruling, saying they cannot have a second remonstrance period. Petitioners against annexation originally sued in March, challenging the city's annexation of 2 areas southwest of Bloomington. As part of the lawsuit, petitioners asked for a second 90-day period to collect remonstrance signatures, saying they needed more time due to the pandemic. By rejecting the petitioner's appeal, the Court of Appeals upheld the originally scheduled trial date of November 13th. The Hoosier Lottery is set to deliver tens of millions of dollars more to Indiana this year than previously expected. Back in December, halfway through the current fiscal year, lottery revenues were on course to essentially meet expectations, delivering around $330 million to the state. But after a third quarter surge, the state is expecting to rake in more than $360 million from the lottery. This is used to help teacher, police, and firefighter pensions and reduce the cost of license plate at the BMV. The mill has received a $1.37 million grant from the state to expand its Code IT Academy program across 10 counties over the next 3 years.
That will help us better position not only sometimes even the curriculum of the classes, but also help prepare the students who graduate to be ready to take an interview and hopefully get on at those positions.
Code IT Academy is a free 10-week training program run by the mill in partnership with Regional Opportunities Initiatives and Ivy Tech. It provides training in areas like web development and IT administration to adult Hoosiers with and without college degrees. Grant funds will cover hiring on-site facilitators at Code IT Academy's new locations and pay for certification exams for students. That's it for headlines this week. Back to you, Perry.
Thanks, Clayton. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk.
Indiana University purchased the land where the Fiji House once stood, but 5 years later it remains green space. And we talk with an expert about the debt ceiling crisis and what a default could mean for everyday Hoosiers.
These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front line
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Now streaming on the PBS app, the definitive collection of documentaries from award-winning filmmaker Ken Burns.
Hemingway, the man, is much more interesting than the myth.
It is a story that Americans have to reckon with.
He's got my job, I'm the town.
Discover over 40 groundbreaking films that bring our history to life. Stream the Ken Burns collection now with Passport on the PBS app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The U.S. is poised to default on its debt for the first time ever if Congress and the President can't come to an agreement to raise it soon. Democrats have been arguing for a clean debt ceiling package. The Republicans, led by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, have passed a bill tying raising the debt ceiling to spending cuts. The national debt is currently $31.4 trillion. And if nothing is done and the U.S. defaults on its loans, economists warn that the impact on the global economy could be catastrophic. For more on the debt crisis and what it means, we're joined by Ryan Brewer, the head of the IU Division of Business at IUPU Columbus and an associate professor of finance. Professor, we know that the national debt is the accumulated borrowing of the United States, but when we hear national debt ceiling, what is it they're referring to?
Right, that's a good question. The national debt ceiling is the level of budgetary spending that Congress has allowed to take place during a certain period. And that number was eclipsed as of this past January. The number is 31.4 trillion. And that's, we eclipsed it. We're running into reserve funds right now, and that's where we are. The system started in 1917 as a way to fund deficit spending, with World War I being the most recent example at that time. And it was just more efficient to pass a single law to allow the government to run up a deficit to take care of a lot of different projects all at once rather than one project at a time. Of course, lately, the rhetoric between the two parties has become more acrimonious. And we experienced this back in 2011, again in 2013. We've gotten kind of used to the debt ceiling having to be raised because during this century, we've really experienced three separate catastrophes that have required deficit spending each time. First, it was 9/11. We started out about 5.8 trillion as national debt. And as a consequence to 9/11, we started the war, and we ended up with a $10 trillion debt level at the end of that period. That was followed up by the Great Recession in 2008, where we were starting out with a country at $10 trillion in debt. And by the time we ramped out of that we were up to 22.7 trillion 11 years later. Then, of course, we just experienced COVID-19.
But this time, Professor, Republicans are tying spending cuts to any deal to raise that debt limit. Has that been a common negotiating tactic in the past when it comes to making the decision?
Yeah, definitely. It's almost predictable. What Republicans generally want to do is they want to cut spending. And what Democrats generally want to do is provide cash flow for the systems that we have in place to operate the country. And so they're wrangling with each other over this. But the reality is, neither one of these parties should actually want a default. We've never had a default in this country. The world depends on the United States to operate its financial system with responsibility and with trust. And I think both sides hopefully know this. They have in the past. And we'll hope that we get some good news this Memorial Day weekend.
We're hearing today that a deal could be near that would raise the debt ceiling but cap some new spending. How much do you think that would satisfy both sides of the aisle?
Well, just any kind of a deal at all would be fantastic news. We're on one side of the Libra scale, you've got the minutia of various components of our economy, and they argue over that, which is fine. But on the other side of the Libra scale is a catastrophe of driving our car straight off the road into a tree. So I don't think either party wants that. I think any deal would be fantastic.
We've got about half a minute. Can you explain, if the U.S. were to default, what that would mean for the average American?
Well, first of all, we've never seen it, so it's hard to know this, but you can imagine interest rates would immediately rise all across the yield curve. The value of the dollar would plummet internationally. The dollar would be less valuable. Companies would not know how to predict demand for their goods and services, so they have to lay people off. The people that weren't laid off would have less job security. People, even within the country, in certain parts of the country, might not take dollars anymore in a worst case scenario as a means for counterparty exchange. So this is all stuff we really don't want to find out what happens. It's just better if they can strike a deal, and then we can be responsible about how we handle the budget process in the future once we get the debt ceiling raised.
Ryan Brewer, IUPU Columbus, thank you. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Phi Gamma Delta once had its fraternity at the corner of 3rd and Indiana Streets in what is sometimes referred to as the Old Crescent. Known as the Fiji House, the fraternity was torn down in 2017. IU acquired the property, but for now, it remains a green space. Sarah Vaughn has the story.
Like many universities, Indiana University acquires property for long-term planning, but without any specific or immediate projects in mind. That's according to Tom Morrison, IU's Vice President for Capital Planning and Facilities.
Sometimes if you draw the line in between when we acquired property and when we eventually build upon that property, you might find decades in between.
Morrison says acquiring 631 East 3rd Street was important because it was the last piece of the older part of campus the university didn't already own. That part of campus is known as the Old Crescent. Wiley Hall, Swain Hall, Ballantyne, and the Geological Sciences Building are part of a crescent of historic buildings arcing around Dunn Meadow. The university undertook renovations of Old Crescent buildings in phases, most recently completing renovations at Ballantyne and the Geological Sciences Building in 2020. The university had eyed one small slice of the crescent for decades, though, the site of the old Fiji House. Reportedly, it missed a chance at the site in the 1940s, but now that it has it, it's simply green space. Morrison acknowledges people speculate about the university's plans for the site.
Many people probably go to an automatic assumption that it might have been an expansion of the law school. There were others who thought it was going to be an expansion of physics. And still others who think, something in between. And, but really, we have not, since we acquired the property, had any plans for the site.
The Zeta chapter of Phi Gamma Delta had called 631 East 3rd Street home for more than a century. When it needed to move, the fraternity, often referred to as Fiji, came by its current location at East 8th and North Woodlawn in a land swap. IU trustees approved the deal in 2014. The university originally tagged 6 buildings on that block for demolition to make room for the new 52,000 square foot fraternity house. But the demolition proposal prompted public protest because many homes in the North Woodlawn neighborhood dated back to the early 1900s. The public pushback was so great, the university agreed to relocate 5 of the homes and demolish only 1, reportedly at a cost of $1 million. The relocated homes went to vacant lots the university owned in the area. 631 East 3rd Street, the site of the old Fiji House, will remain vacant, save for landscaping.
What you are not seeing on the immediate horizon is building new buildings. We just came through a period of, if you think of new academic buildings that were added, think the Global and International Studies building, the Ferguson building that we just opened, the additions to the Kelly School, the additions to the O'Neill School, SPIA, 2 buildings related to Luddy, or the Luddy School. That was a significant amount of addition of square footage during the last decade.
He says about 2/3 of the university's capital projects were renovation, and that priority remains. But he says, space-wise,
we know that our capacity to utilize the space we have with the students we have today is about right.
And so Morrison says the site of the old fraternity house will be green space for the foreseeable future. For WFIU News, I'm Sarah Vaughn.
A group of recent Bloomington South graduates won the school a $50,000 sustainability award in a national science competition. The group is making barium sulfate paint to use on a mural in Bloomington and pitched the project last week in Washington, D.C.
This paint, which is the super simple thing, right? Everybody paints, everybody has paint on many things they own. If you just use this, it's something you can do to kind of help mitigate global warming, to help fight climate change. And I think that was really appealing to me, and I think that's kind of what appealed to the judges.
Kiang says the paint is so white it reflects sunlight and reduces building temperatures. The students will produce large amounts of the paint this summer and use it on a wall at the Wonder Lab Museum. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.